What's up, guys? 2024 brought a ton of surprises and disappointments with Marvel and DC productions. We had X-Men, Batman, Joker, Superman, and so much more that dropped throughout the year. This is going to be our recap of 2024, and we're going to pick out the worst and best releases of the year. Just remember, this list is purely my opinion here on the channel, so come along with me in this video, and if you have a different take, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'd love to read them all. Welcome to Comic Chronicles. 2024 was also our debut year here on YouTube, and we're close to hitting our first anniversary. Still in the recap vibe, let's remember all the bad and good stuff that came out from both Marvel and DC. So hit that like button on the video and subscribe to our channel. 2025 is shaping up to be an amazing year for releases, and we'll be here covering everything, keeping you in the loop and chatting directly with you about these new drops. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell because I'll soon be dropping a video on what to expect in 2025. Let's get into it. Kicking off with the worst of 2024, I gotta start with this film that's a total flop, Madam Web. The script was lacking, the performances were weak, and the characters were a disaster. To sum it up, it was all just bad, undoubtedly one of the biggest embarrassments of the year. Moving on to Marvel's series, we had Echo and Agatha all along this year. Echo is easily one of the worst productions of the year. I remember during the series promo, they heavily leaned on the fight scenes and the appearance of Daredevil, plus Kingpin was also in there. It's a terrible show. They tried to sell it as something on par with Daredevil, but it fell way short. Now talking about Agatha all along, I'd say this series wasn't as terrible as the previous ones I mentioned, but I didn't get hyped about it at all. I'd even say Agatha's show was pretty niche within the Marvel universe. There's definitely an audience that loves it, but there's also a good chunk of Marvel fans who didn't, and I count myself among them. Now switching over to the DC side, we also had the release of a pretty generic animated series, Kite Man. Hell yeah! It's a spin-off of Harley Quinn but doesn't hold a candle to it. The highlight of this animation is Bane's participation, which has some funny scenes, but he's still a character from the Harley Quinn series. The main characters tried, but they just can't draw attention like Harley and Ivy do in Harley Quinn. Even though I don't think it's outright terrible, it still doesn't make it to the best of the year. Now let's talk about two more films released by Sony, Venom 3 and Kraven. Honestly, I'm glad Sony finally gave up on making those Spider-Man villain movies. It was about time to stop. If you enjoyed those Sony films, no worries, you might have liked them, but I didn't like them at all. Kraven is pretty generic, and even with other Spider-Man villains involved, it doesn't change that the film is just a run-of-the-mill action flick. I won't say it's worse than Madam Web, no superhero movie could be that bad, but Kraven isn't good either. I'm sorry if you liked it. As for Venom, man, the film has some interesting action scenes just like Kraven, but a superhero movie can't just rely on good action, the story needs to be solid too. Honestly, I admit it does have a lot going for it compared to Venom 1 and Venom 2, but in my opinion, Venom: The Last Dance isn't good enough to make it onto the best of the year list. Back to DC, we certainly have more bad stuff, this time with the anime Suicide Squad Isekai, which dropped around mid-year. This is definitely one of the year's worst. It's not quite at Madam Web level, but Suicide Squad Isekai has a totally forgettable story. If you replace the entire crew with random characters, the story stays the same. There's no compelling reason for those characters to be involved. They have zero importance and lack a solid backstory, leaving a lot to be desired. In my opinion, if the goal is to invest more in anime, it would be way better for Warner and DC Studios to focus on more significant characters, like an anime featuring Wonder Woman or Flash. That could be pretty cool. It would be way better than Suicide Squad, which has struggled in almost every adaptation. Even in the games, the Suicide Squad hasn't done well. Continuing with the worst from DC in 2024, I have to mention the three-part animation, Crisis on Infinite Earths. The three animated films of the Crisis are pretty bad. The first one has some interesting moments and is decent with a cool Flash story, but the other two parts are just awful. It's a shame because with this, we won't see a very good adaptation of Crisis on Infinite Earths anytime soon. When part 2 came out, I made a video critiquing this animation, and it was one of the first videos on the channel to get a lot of views. The general audience largely didn't enjoy these animations either. I think no one expected this, but the Crisis on Infinite Earths that the CW did in their series was way better. Back to Marvel, I want to address the animated series that was released at the end of this year, which was also a huge disappointment. Season 3 of What If was yet another letdown, proving it's time to wrap things up. I've never liked the animation style, it feels very stiff, but there are episodes in the first season that were fantastic. The second and third seasons, however, are disappointing. They could have taken the concept of What If and done some fantastic things since they had basically all the Marvel heroes at their disposal, but instead, we got some boring plots and Peggy Carter as the lead. Wrapping up the worst list, we can't forget Joker, Folie à Deux, the biggest buzzkill of 2024. This film was anticipated as the sequel to the first Joker film, which grossed over $1 billion and even won 2 Oscars. You'd think the sequel had everything going for it, right? But it didn't. Director Todd Phillips completely destroyed what was done in the first movie and used the excuse that people were misinterpreting Joker's actions in the film, as if audiences were glorifying the brutality of the first film. But honestly, that excuse doesn't fly. Warner wanted to replicate the success, while the director didn't want a sequel but did it to mock Warner and everyone involved. That's the sad truth. Joker 2 ended up being one of the biggest flops in history. Alright, enough about the bad stuff, that list was long. Now let's focus on the good things that happened in 2024 involving both Marvel and DC. Before we get to the heavy hitters that came out this year, the top of the top, I want to kick things off with some other productions that are also good and deserve to be in the best list. Starting with Watchmen, the animated film was split into 2 parts, and to the surprise of many, it was a solid adaptation. I admit I'm not a fan of the animation style, as it reminds me of What If, but aside from that, the story is great since they're adapting one of the best comics of all time. They adapt much more of what occurred in the comics than Zack Snyder's movie did, though there are some details that draw from Snyder's film as a reference. It's a good animation, not quite at the same level as the comic, but among all the adaptations of Watchmen, except for the HBO series, which continues the comic and is in a different league, the Watchmen Parts 1 and 2 are the best adaptation to date. And now we're reaching the top of the list. The next ones are truly the best releases of 2024, and I'll start off with Batman Caped Crusader. That's right folks, finally, another animated series featuring Batman has been launched. The Dark Knight hasn't had his own series in years, and this isn't just another Batman animated show. Caped Crusader is essentially a spiritual continuation of Batman the Animated Series. Most of the creative team from that show is involved, and on top of that, Matt Reeves, the director of The Batman in 2022 and the visionary behind this universe that extends to the series The Penguin, joined as a producer. Caped Crusader brings a noir vibe, with a detective-style approach set in a Gotham City reminiscent of the 40s, even though the series itself, like BTAS, is anachronistic, featuring different era elements to give it a timeless feel. The scripts in Caped Crusader are among the best of the year, and I'd say they come close to the excellence of another piece on this list that I'll reveal shortly. But for sure, Batman, Caped Crusader is one of the best productions of 2024. The biggest drawback, in my opinion, is the animation quality. Warner didn't want to invest much, which is a shame because it should have been phenomenal. Creature Commandos. The animation hasn't wrapped yet, but we can already conclude that it's definitely one of the best productions from last year. Despite the animation showing some of James Gunn's quirks involving jokes, certain takes, and the team dynamics making you feel like you've seen it before, Creature Commandos has some excellent episodes, and the animation quality is incredible. I genuinely wish Caped Crusader had animation of the same quality. Moving on to Deadpool and Wolverine. Marvel only had one theatrical release in 2024, and it hit the mark. Both Marvel and DC slowed down on excessive cinema releases, especially since discussions about superhero movie fatigue were becoming more prevalent, until Deadpool and Wolverine launched and pulled in over $1 billion at the box office. It was a massive success and a clear response to both Marvel and DC that fans aren't fatigued with hero films, they're fatigued with bad films featuring horrendous scripts that leave you frustrated coming out of the theater. Deadpool and Wolverine doesn't have a perfect story, it actually has quite a few plot holes, but it was well executed and generally well received. We had farewells to the heroes from the old Fox movies, Deadpool throwing down with Wolverine, Hugh Jackman returning even more amazing in the role of Logan, rocking the classic yellow Wolverine suit, plus a ton of comic references and surprise cameos. It was awesome to see Channing Tatum as Gambit again and even Wesley Snipes back as legendary Blade, along with X-23 and Elektra. Not to mention Chris Evans reprising his role as Human Torch, which caught everyone off guard with some funny moments. It was an excellent film. There wasn't much superhero cinema this year, but what we did get was right on point. Now back to DC, we can't overlook Season 2 of My Adventures with Superman. Guys, what an incredible season. It started strong, but it just kept getting better with each episode. The season focuses on Superman's inner conflicts, struggling to believe he's someone who truly makes a difference and helps people. It shows that Superman and Lois can't be apart, and it also introduces Brainiac and Supergirl as the villains. It's a fantastic take and origin story for Supergirl, who starts off as a villain but ultimately finds redemption upon discovering Brainiac's true plans and everything he put her through. This animation is incredible, and I recommend checking out our reviews of the show. Watch and uncover all the Easter eggs and secrets hidden in every episode. Just click the card showing on your screen to get all the details. And still talking about the Big Blue, I can't skip mentioning the fourth and final season of Superman and Lois. Guys, if you haven't watched Superman and Lois yet, you should. It's the best Superman adaptation out there. The show presents the true essence of Superman, the hopeful Superman, the ultimate symbol of heroism, and they've managed to create the best Doomsday adaptation yet. How amazing is that? The last season is fantastic, but I recommend the whole series. It's absolutely worth it, and the actors give stellar performances throughout. Now, moving on to the next entry on this list, which many consider the best of 2024, X-Men 97. This show is truly a masterpiece. The animation is spectacular, the story is strong, and Episode 5, which focuses on the Genosha Massacre, is surreal. Even Episode 3, which features Jubilee, the weakest episode, is still beautifully animated and a solid watch. X-Men 97 has set a standard of excellence that all animated series should strive for. Batman, Caped Crusader should aim for an animation quality on par with that, as in terms of story, it doesn't quite measure up to X-Men 97 but doesn't fall far behind. X-Men is a fantastic team animation. It has heart, badass action scenes, formidable villains, and more. Without a doubt, it's the best superhero animation in the last 10 to 15 years. Calling it the top production featuring superheroes in 2024 isn't an exaggeration, but hold on, there's one more. The Penguin. Another masterpiece related to the superhero universe, and for many, this is the best series of the year. The Penguin delivers on every level. The series kicked off strong, although it didn't have a huge early audience to make it a phenomenon right away, but it improved with each episode, and by the end, we had a true work of art. The Penguin doesn't have any bad episodes. At worst, there are episodes that aren't as strong as others, but even those are still pretty good. The series explores Oswald Cobblepot's past, his struggles, and his pain, bringing humanity to the character while still establishing him as a true villain in the Batman lore. It features incredible characters like Sophia and Victor, tragic resolutions, and a gripping storyline about Gotham's mafia. It's absolutely worth watching, and without a doubt, it was the biggest surprise of the year. Most didn't expect the best superhero live action of 2024 to be The Penguin. It was genuinely exceptional and deserves every possible award. So, folks, that wraps up our list of the best and worst of 2024. It's been quite a recap. We really saw a bunch of junk getting released, but the good stuff more than made up for it. Do you agree with my list? Disagree with anything? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's chat a bit about all the cool stuff that happened this past year. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell because 2025 is going to bring a lot of good content. This year looks set to be better than the last, and you won't want to miss anything. Subscribe to stay in the loop, and before I wrap up, I want to thank you for all the support and for joining us throughout this year. You guys make a huge difference here on the channel, and it's only standing strong because of your daily support. I genuinely appreciate everyone who watches, comments, likes, and shares. You all are the best. Happy New Year to you, and may 2025 be a year full of achievements for each of you. Thank you so much, and keep following us because we have a lot of good stuff coming your way. See you next time.